Hey, my name is Chris Brennan from the Astrology Podcast, and this is your horoscope for Cancer rising for the entire year ahead of 2021. So you can pay attention to my horoscopes both from the perspective of if you have your sun in Cancer or your moon in Cancer, but your rising sign is preferred because that's more personal to you in your actual birth chart. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it. So here's the planetary alignments calendar that shows where the planets will start at the beginning of the year and how far through the signs of the zodiac they'll get by the end of the year and which signs specifically they'll traverse at different points. So there's a few major things that I wanted to talk about for your major transits for 2021 to give you the outlines of some of the broad themes. One of the major things is that Saturn and Jupiter have recently completed their transit through the sign of Capricorn in December of 2020, and they have moved into the sign of Aquarius, which is your 8th house of shared resources and other people's money. So one of the good pieces of news right off the bat this year is that that means that for all of the cardinal signs, but in particular Cancer rising charts, you've successfully completed a very long transit of Saturn going through Capricorn and through your 7th house of relationships that's lasted for the past 3 years since December of 2017. So the good news right off the bat is that that should remove some setbacks and some tension and some obstacles that you may have been experiencing in the sphere of relationships, especially one-on-one partnerships as well as romantic relationships over the course of the past 3 years. So congratulations for surviving that transit. Additionally, at the very beginning of the year, Mars moves out of Aries and departs from your 10th house of career. It moves out and moves into Taurus on the 6th of January 2021. That is more good news, especially for those of you with day charts, because then that means you've completed an extra long 6-month transit of Mars going retrograde in your 10th house of career, where it may have brought more tension, more strife, and the potential for more conflict in the sphere of your career and your overall life direction. So those are two pretty heavy transits that characterize 2020 that are over at this point as we move into January of 2021. So that's the good news. So what I want to focus on talking about first, with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, the great conjunction that just occurred in early Aquarius in December of 2020, the effect of that conjunction is really going to echo in the case of Jupiter for about a year, because Jupiter will be transiting through Aquarius and through your 8th house of shared resources all the way until the end of 2021. And in the case of Saturn, it's going to be transiting through that sign for the next 3 years. So that's actually a long-term transit. So the 8th house is the house that traditionally has to do with things like mortality, inheritance. But one of the topics that I see come up very frequently is money of other people in your life or assets that belong to other people. So this can sometimes mean like your partner, if you're married, their income and their financial well-being, whether they're doing well financially or whether they're not. It can also mean money that belongs to a business partner. In some instances, the 8th house can pertain to inheritance. It can also pertain to taxes or debt. But basically, we've got a long-term Saturn transit that could indicate some obstacles or some surmountable difficulties that come up in that area of your life over the course of the next few years. And there should have been a preview of what that's about for a few months in the second quarter of last year. Between, I believe it was late March and early July, Saturn dipped into Aquarius and should have given you a little bit of a preview of some themes and some obstacles and perhaps some difficulties that might come up over the course of the next 3 years as Saturn is transiting through Aquarius. So I should say, though, that if it was very difficult during that time, some of those 8th house topics, it's not necessarily the case that that's going to be that way for the entirety of the next 3 years, especially in 2021, because we have Jupiter transiting through that sign simultaneously, and therefore bringing some balance and some moderation, and as well as some growth and optimism to that part of your life, which is one of the things that Jupiter does. So it's kind of balancing things out or restraining Saturn and some of its more sort of conservative impulses with the opposing significations of Jupiter, which are growth and expansion. So that's one of the major transits you have going on this year. Other major things that are happening is Uranus, which has been transiting through your 11th house. It just went in over the course of the past couple of years. Your 11th house of friends and groups and alliances is going to form 3 exact squares with Saturn at different points over the course of 2021. So one of them is going to take place in mid-February, then another exact hit in mid-June, and then finally one third final hit on December 24th of 2021. So that's going to be important, especially for those of you that have placements in your birth chart between 7 and 13 degrees of the fixed signs, since Uranus is transiting 7 degrees or transiting the fixed sign of Taurus, and Saturn is transiting the fixed sign of Aquarius. So if you do have natal planets within that range of degrees, then it seems to indicate that there may be some tensions here between some unexpected shakeups that are happening in your social circle in terms of friends and groups and alliances, indicated by Uranus, and some of the themes of consolidation and just growth through striving and through hard work that's indicated by Saturn going through your 8th house of shared resources. So it may be that there's some sort of connection or overlap there between friends and other people's money, and that's a bit of a hot spot or a tense spot that you may want to pay attention to this year, because if there are going to be any sort of fireworks or tensions, I would bet that that would be the main area where you might see some of them this year. That's especially the case when Mars ingresses into the fixed signs. It's going to move through 3 fixed signs this year, first through Taurus starting in January, and it's going to square Saturn exactly January 13th, and then conjoin Uranus exactly on January 20th. Then later in the year, Mars will move into Leo, where it will hit Saturn and Uranus again on July 1st and 3rd. And then finally, Mars will move through Scorpio later in the year, where it will hit Saturn and Uranus again around November 10th and November 17th. So again, we're talking about the first and second decan of the fixed signs, basically. And if you have planetary placements in your birth chart around those degrees, those could be sensitive points during those parts of the year where there could be some tension or potentially some conflict between friends and other people's money. So keep an eye out for that as a potential area that you might want to work on and be a little bit extra alert in order to avoid any difficulties that could be avoided if you simply knew about them ahead of time, since now you do. All right, so those are some of the things I wanted to mention in terms of Uranus and Saturn and those 3 squares. I also wanted to mention the eclipses that are happening this year, which are taking place in the signs of Gemini, Sagittarius, and Taurus, which are your 12th, 6th, and 11th houses, respectively. So this eclipse series, the first eclipse is going to happen in Sagittarius around May 26th, and that's a total lunar eclipse. And that's going to take place in your 6th house, which is the house of work and health. It can also have to do with subordinates if you have anybody that works underneath you. And then there's also going to be a Gemini solar eclipse that takes place on the 10th of June in the opposite house, which is your 12th house. So this is actually a continuation of a series of eclipses that started in 2020. And what we're going to see is a further development of some of the stories that were indicated there, especially that started in November, late November of 2020, and early December 14th to be exact, of 2020, when there was a Gemini-Sagittarius eclipse pair. So some of the themes that this might relate to, I mentioned work, which is a 6th house topic, and for eclipses, my main keyword is great beginnings and great endings. So you may see some great beginnings and great endings when it comes to work and service, or areas in your life where either you play a subordinate role to other people, or areas where there's other people that play a subordinate role as assistants to you. So beginnings and endings are my main keywords for that. The 6th house also has to do sometimes with physical health, whereas the 12th house can have to do with mental health. So there may be some great beginnings and endings this year in terms of work in that area of working on physical or mental health issues in order to maintain overall balance and equilibrium in your life and address any issues that come up as they need to be addressed. So that would be a good area to be proactive in your life if either of those two areas are things that you need to work on for one reason or another. The 12th house can also be a house just generally of solitude and of places where solitude is something, and pulling back from social activities is something that's healthy and restorative. So that's another theme. And then finally, sometimes the 6th and 12th axis can have to do with people that work at cross purposes to you, or people that you just don't get along with for whatever reason, and some great beginnings of potential feuds in that area, or potentially even great endings where you're wrapping things up and bringing some open conflicts to completion with individuals in some area of your life. So that's another area to pay attention to for those eclipses. I did want to mention, so I mentioned the first eclipse series, but there's also a second eclipse series. One of those is the completion of the Sagittarius Gemini eclipses, which happens on December 4th. But another one is a partial lunar eclipse that happens in the sign of Taurus on November 19th. And this is significant for you because this is, again, your 11th house of friends, groups, alliances, and hopes or wishes for the future. So this is opening up a new eclipse series that's actually going to become much more prominent in 2022, but it actually starts here at the very end or towards the end of 2021, where you have this lunar eclipse that occurs. And since the lunar eclipse, it should be some sort of great culmination or sense of things coming to fruition in the place or in the area of your life that has to do with friends and alliances and groups. So perhaps some of the tensions that we were talking about earlier in the year that had to do with seeking liberation and seeking new experiences in your friend group that has to do with Uranus transiting through your 11th could start to come to culmination in some way and start to bear significant results, where the actions that you took in the past suddenly start to manifest and become more clear at this time in your life in late 2021. So that's really just opening up a chapter, though, and a series of eclipses that's going to be bouncing back and forth between Taurus, your 11th house of friends and groups, and Scorpio, your 5th house of children, creativity, and sexual activity and expression over the course of 2022. So I don't want to put too much emphasis on it, but I did want to mention it because that's going to open up a new sequence of events in your life that are going to become, or at least are going to bring those events and those circumstances, those parts of your life into greater prominence over the course of next year, of 2022. So good to start paying attention to it now at the end of 2021 when that eclipse begins. All right, so the last thing that I wanted to mention is just that Jupiter will ingress into your 9th house late in December. So we can see here on the planetary alignments calendar, Jupiter moves into Pisces at the very end of 2021 on December 28th, where it will transit for the rest of 2022. And Pisces, as we can see here, is your 9th house of religion and education, personal philosophy, foreign travel, interaction with foreign cultures and people that are from backgrounds that are different than your own. So it's opening up a period, again, that will primarily be focused on 2022 of expansion and growth and development in that area of your life or to do with those topics. But there will be a preview of it earlier in 2021. So Jupiter goes into Pisces in December and stays there. However, if you back up and look at May of 2021, you'll actually see that Jupiter just barely dips its foot into Pisces for a few months, starting on May 13th. So Jupiter goes into Pisces for a little bit of what I call a preview period, where some of those 9th house topics will start to become known in your life between the middle of May, and then we see Jupiter stationing retrograde on the 20th of June on the solstice, and then Jupiter retrogrades out of that sign in July, and it moves back into Aquarius and back into your 8th house of shared resources, where it's transiting for most of the year with Saturn. So I wanted to mention that just because that period between May, basically mid-May and mid-July, or late July actually, should give you some idea of some of those broader transits of Jupiter going through Pisces that are really going to become much more significant starting in December of 2021. But you'll get that little preview period. So start paying attention to any of those topics if they start coming up in your life, because even if they seem somewhat insignificant at the time or somewhat transitory, it may turn out that when that comes back in December of next year of 2021, that it plays a much more significant role in your life than you first anticipated. So keep an eye out for that. All right, I think, looking at my notes, that's the last major thing that I meant to mention for your year ahead forecast for 2021. So good luck next year. Be sure to check out the Astrology Podcast Year Ahead Forecast, where we looked at all of the astrology and broke it down into 4 quarters for the entirety of 2021. And that was like a 3.5 hour recording. So take a look at that for more information. And thanks for watching, and good luck next year. I'll see you again at the end of this year for maybe a bit of a return and a forecast for 2022. So good luck. Many of the images and calendars that were used in this episode are now available as posters on the astrologypodcast.com website. This includes our 2021 planetary alignments calendar, which shows all of the ingresses and retrogrades and lunations this year, the planetary movements calendar, which shows how far through the signs of the zodiac each of the planets will get during the course of 2021, and also other posters that we have, like our significations of the 12 houses poster, so that you can personalize and understand how each of these transits relates to your own birth chart. We also recently released our 2021 Auspicious Elections Full Year Ahead Electional Astrology Report, where Lisa Scheim and I went through each of the next 12 months, and we picked out one lucky date, which would be good for launching new ventures and undertakings using the principles of electional astrology. So you can find out more about that report at chrisbrennanastrologer.com. Thanks to all the patrons that supported the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on Patreon. In particular, thanks to the patrons on our producers tier, including Nate Craddock, Marin Altman, Thomas Miller, Catherine Conroy, Michelle Marilot, Christy Moe, Ariana Amor, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Sumo Kopic, and Nadia Habhab. For more information about how to become a patron or have your name listed in the credits, please visit patreon.com/astrologypodcast. Also, special thanks to our sponsors, including the Northwest Astrological Conference, which is happening online May 27th through the 31st, 2021. Find out more information at norwac.net. The Mountain Astrologer magazine, which you can find out more information about at mountainastrologer.com. The ISAR Astrology Conference, happening August 18th through the 22nd, 2021. More information at isar2020.org. The Honeycomb Collective Personal Astrological Almanacs, which you can find out more information about at honeycomb.co. Also, the Portland School of Astrology, more information at portlandastrology.org. The AstroGold Astrology app, available for both iPhone and Android, available at astrogold.io. And finally, the primary software program that we use on episodes of the Astrology Podcast is called SolarFire Astrology Software, which is available at alabe.com, and you can get a 15% discount with the promo code AP15.